Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Bullseye, Greatest Hits, a 5-issue miniseries published in 2004 by Marvel Comics under their Marvel Knights imprint. This was written by Daniel Way. I think this is the only thing I own by Daniel Way. The only other thing I read by him is a Punisher story arc that was quite interesting. I was quite surprised at what he was putting the characters through. If I remember correctly, I think Kingpin and Elektra hook up romantically. I was just like, what the hell's going on? So I kind of put his name in my memory, and I found these mostly for $1 in dollar bins. I said, I'll give it a chance. I always like Bullseye as a villain. And the art on this is by Steve Dillon of the English artist, probably best known for Preacher, though he was drawing comics, I believe, in the late 70s, early 80s, 2000 AD, Deadline, stuff like that. And all the covers are by Mike Deodato Jr. This is a very interesting series. I mean, I haven't read many superhero comics in the past 20, 30 years, and I have a feeling superhero comics aren't this interesting, to be honest. This was during that golden age when I think it's the golden age of Marvel, is right after the bankruptcy in the late 90s. Joe Quesada took over, and Marvel was doing really interesting, daring stuff. You know, having Richard Corbin draw the Hulk, and Grant Morrison took over the X-Men, and that Peter Milligan, Mike Allred X-Force comic. I mean, it was a really fertile time for them. And I think that time's over a long time ago. I think it stopped when the movie money came in. And I guess they're more worried now about keeping the intellectual properties, unmolested by crazy guys like Daniel Way and Garth Ennis. Daniel Way actually reminds me a lot of Garth Ennis, his writing style. And just the fact that he's not reverential of superheroes. I mean, Garth Ennis hates them. But I have a feeling Daniel Way isn't a total fanboy. He likes to take these superheroes and break them. So we start off with part 1, The Last Place on Earth. We see these 2 government agents, Baldry and Hoskins. And they show up at this seemingly abandoned factory. But when they get inside, we realize it's a high security, super secret government facility. As they walk through this place, it's almost like the beginning of Get Smart. There's so many security checkpoints, retinal scans, DNA tests. Hoskins tells Baldry that if there's any kind of security breach, this hallway fills up with instantly hardening foam. And then the whole place, if there's a real security breach, the whole place gets torched with napalm, basically. It's almost like a CDC lab, the security measures going on here. While they're walking through all these checkpoints, they're having a conversation. And this is where you can see like how much like Garth Ennis, Daniel Way is. It's just great dialogue where we already have a sense of these guys' characters after 4 or 5 pages of them just chatting. You totally get a sense of who these guys are. And this will continue as the issue progresses. Just really sharp dialogue, very, really reveals the character without any captions or exposition. Like, you don't need that. Daniel Way doesn't need that shit. The security is so tight, they have to take off all their clothes when they enter. And Baldry even has to leave his prescription glasses behind. Because, of course, you probably have figured out what this place is. This is basically a super high-tech prison. It has a few other prisoners, but all of these precautions are in place because Bullseye is incarcerated here. And the government knows exactly how dangerous Bullseye is. It's kind of funny considering that Bullseye has no superpowers. He just has really good aim. But he's that deadly that the government treats him like a biochemical weapon. Like, this is the kind of security you'd have for plutonium or something, or, some, weaponized anthrax. So apparently, Baldry is going to be in charge of this interrogation of Bullseye. Bullseye has, before being caught, he stole 3 nuclear warheads, and they're missing, and he's not talking. So they got these guys in to hopefully get the information from him. They finally make it to the, inner sanctum. They meet the warden here, and he basically fills them in a little bit about this prison. He introduces them to Horace, the main guard, who basically every waking hour, he's just right by Bullseye's cell in case he starts any trouble. Kind of looks like a bargain basement deathlock. He's got a gun. His arm is just a gun. He only has 1 bullet, as Hoskins points out. He's a Barney Fife for the new millennium. He only has 1 bullet for security reasons. They figure if Bullseye somehow overtakes him, he only has 1 bullet. If he had 50 rounds, and Bullseye he could take on thousands of people probably. Though of course Bullseye really doesn't need bullets. He can use a paper clip if he needs to. Even his cell is made from super next gen polymers, and it's like they're keeping the Hulk. It's like the security they'd have if they had the Hulk incarcerated. It's crazy. But it really builds up the idea that Bullseye is quite a formidable villain. As you can see, this art by Steve Dillon, like I said, it's never that exciting, but it tells the story well. There's a little bit of character business here. Baldry asks for a place to be alone so he can meditate before his first interrogation. Kind of interesting little bit, considering that we don't really ever have a callback to it. It's not like he's spiritual or anything. So we find out that, I keep forgetting their names, sorry, Hoskins here, he has the scar because he was the agent who apprehended Bullseye. Bullseye killed his whole team and would have killed Hoskins except for the fact that Bullseye had a seizure all of a sudden. Apparently, Bullseye has a tumor in his brain, and that caused the seizure. That's the only reason they caught him. It would take 200 guys to take down Bullseye. We also find out that Bullseye, a few months before his incarceration, there was a similar facility on the East Coast, just like this one. And Bullseye blew the whole thing up and killed every single person on that base. So Baldry basically tells Hoskins his strategy. It's going to be very psychological. He's going to play on Bullseye's ego. He's going to get him to talk about himself, and when he gets his guard down, hopefully he'll want to brag about, his achievements, and he might spill something about these nuclear bombs. You can tell by Hoskins' expression he's not having it. He just wants to do the whole old school TV cop routine and just throw him Bullseye up against the wall and, slap him around to get the information. So I kind of like how different this is from your average superhero comic. It's like we've gotten 20 pages or something, 18 pages, and we finally see Bullseye. And he's not even in his, his superhero outfit, of course. I think it's kind of funny, these security measures, they all have to wear these medical gowns. So it's kind of weird how these big tough CIA type guys, but they look it's hard to take them seriously. They're wearing these little smocks. That's a nice, Steve Dillon is really good at facial expressions. I just wish he drew more than 4 faces. You can tell by Bullseye's expression the way this is going to pan out. At least I kind of guessed. Bullseye just seems like he's pretty damn confident. And I really doubt that Baldry's little plan is going to work. So Baldry gets Bullseye to talk about his childhood. He grew up in Queens. His older brother, here he is shooting pigeons with his BB gun for fun. Little Bullseye, he asks if he can use the gun. And his older brother Nate says, "You're too little. Play with your yo-yo." After Nate turns his back, little Bullseye, Leonard, that was his name, he throws the yo-yo at the pigeon and somehow beheads the pigeon. It's just like, I don't care how good your aim is. I don't think a yo-yo could behead a pigeon. Yeah, it could hit him in the neck and knock him out. But I don't know about the physics of this. There's quite a few silly things in this comic and other Bullseye stories where they kind of, just because you have perfect aim doesn't mean you can do certain things, you know? We also find out that his father was an abusive alcoholic, beat the children and the mom. One day at the breakfast table, Nate tells Leonard, he says, "I want to kill Dad." And then he says, "Don't come home today, Leonard." But Leonard does come home that day, and his apartment building is on fire. Nate comes to the window and says, "Mom's dead, Leonard. Get out of here." And his father's hand grabs him and pulls him back into the fire, where I imagine they both will burn to death. And we see this pretty horrifying image of the father on fire, saying, "Is that the best you can do?" And then, meanwhile, the warden gets a phone call. Apparently, the nukes were found at a playground in Idaho, but the plutonium is missing. To be continued. Issue 2, very creepy Deodato cover. Recap page. And we pretty much start where we left off. So that first meeting with Bullseye ends. Man, just look at the look on his face. And the warden tells him that the nuclear bombs were arranged like a jungle gym. Kids had been playing on them for like a week. Luckily, there's no plutonium in them. So it's a kind of an interesting subplot about these nukes. There's this big mystery. Bullseye stole them in Alaska, and instead of just trying to sell them somewhere in Alaska or Canada, he went all the way down to the lower 48, and that's where they caught him. So they're just like, what was he up to? They have no idea. And they're still trying to find these things, of course. So there's more and more tension between Baldry and Hoskins. Hoskins wants to do it his way. He doesn't like this subtle psychological maneuvering. And Hoskins loses it. This is kind of an interesting character thing, too, where, of course, the warden says that's a very expensive piece of equipment. And Baldry says, I'll write a check for it. Let him work out his frustrations. And so these guys just watch this grown man having a little conniption fit and destroying this monitor. So now it's time for part 2 of their questioning. And Baldry continues to ask him about his past. So now we flash back again. Bullseye is a teenager. He is adopted by foster parents who seem very loving and nice. But it doesn't matter to Bullseye. He's already a psychopath. He doesn't love anything or anyone. Maybe he was always like that. So because of his amazing skill and his amazing aim, he becomes a baseball player, a pitcher, of course. And he quickly gets into the majors. And the day of his first big game, which is at home, his hometown, he's playing a no-hitter. He's pitching a no-hitter. He mentions he loved it. He says even Dad was there. And look at this image. Is that the best you can do? In the middle of the crowd. Obviously, it's an apparition. And what he meant was his foster dad was in there. He's all crying with pride. And so then Bullseye says he just got bored right when he was about to strike out the last pitcher. And he calls up the coach and says, pull me out of the game, I'm done. He's like, what are you talking about? He just thinks he has the jitters. He's like, oh, you can do this, son. You know, just take this guy out and we can all go home. Unfortunately, the batter makes the huge mistake by getting a little sassy with Bullseye. And he says, Bullseye says, so I decided to have a little fun. And he kills the guy with a baseball. I guess that's possible if you aim right at the temple. We don't see what happens. We see all blood on everything. The catcher, the ref, all over his shirt. But it would be kind of funny if his head came off, if he decapitated him with the baseball. Everyone, of course, is horrified. And look at Bullseye's face, that evil smile. He's a true psychotic. So, of course, he gets kicked out of the league. He has to, face trial. And Baldry asks him, so after you were convicted, where did they send you? And Bullseye says, are you serious? A guy with my skills and my basically psychotic, violent attitude? Where do you think they sent me? To the CIA. He was too valuable to rot in a jail, so the CIA recruits him. And they send him down to Nicaragua to train the Contras. And basically Baldry asks him, what was Nicaragua like? It must have been pretty messy down there. And Bullseye says, you have no idea. And we see the Punisher. So we have an idea by this teaser page. It's like, oh shit. I can only imagine if I was reading this month to month, I would have been pretty excited about the next issue. Seeing these two ultimate killing machine psychos go up against each other. Okay, number 3. I really like this cover by Deodato. This is pretty fun superhero art. I forgot to mention something kind of important. When Bullseye was talking about his father, he mentioned that he worked for the government. He was always, he was always out of town doing stuff for the government. But he was a little kid. He didn't really know what his dad did. Now we have Chapter 3, Ego Trip. So apparently they found one of the bombs down in Mexico City in a train car. And this guy, I worked for Bullseye and all I got was dead. So that's some black humor right there. So now the mystery deepens. Why the hell was he shipping this down to Mexico City? Of course, Hoskins brings up the fact that a little past Mexico City is Nicaragua. Maybe there's a connection. And there is something he reveals here that I think is hilarious. I think only Daniel Way would put this into this comic. Apparently, Bullseye is kept on a liquid diet with lots of laxatives Basically, they're afraid that if he has a nice solid bowel movement, he could kill somebody with it. That would be quite a scene. Death by doo-doo. I just loved that. Was just like cracked me up. But also I was like, maybe that's prudent. So flashback to Nicaragua. He's addressing the Contras. It's kind of funny here. He's just insulting them, and his interpreter is like making it nice and making it cordial and polite. He doesn't give a shit about any of this. He's glad he's not in jail. So his interpreter's name is Paolo, and Paolo informs him that they receive money from the local drug lords because they allow the drug lords to use their landing strip. But because the Contras haven't been getting funded well, they haven't been able to defend the strip, and now the drug lords have taken it over. Bullseye gets a big smile on his face and an idea, and he's like, So he basically just commandeers the Contras to take over the landing strip just so he can make his own little fiefdom, basically, where he's going to charge the drug lords now and set up a little, money-making thing. He also sets up Paolo as the paper tiger leader of the whole thing. He says, you're in charge, buddy. He's not. But throughout the drug world, we see all these drug lords saying, who the fuck is Paolo? Because he came out of nowhere, and now he's like in charge of a very important spoke in the drug hub. And then we see, who the fuck is Paolo? As Punisher shaking down this guy. So he's explaining the whole deal he had set up. All these drug lords are flying in. The Yakuza apparently couldn't make it because the Punisher, turns out, shot a missile at their plane. So at the Contra base, where all these drug lords are meeting for this big deal, all of a sudden this mule or donkey, he walks into the camp with two oil barrels tied to him. The Contra, who is tasked with getting rid of the donkey, as he starts pushing it, the Punisher's calling card falls out. And everyone looks at each other like, oh shit. And then the Punisher throws a missile launcher right at the donkey. Now, I thought this was out of character. I know this sounds silly because the Punisher's kind of a nut job. And he's killed thousands upon thousands of people in his career. And I thought it was really just like, why would he kill his innocent donkey? I'm sure there's another way you could have taken these guys out, which is the normal missile. He didn't need this whole, added fuel. Of course, it's not so easy to kill Bullseye. There's a nice panel with this 3D effect. Bullseye immediately gets up, throws a knife right at the Punisher. Hits him dead square in the chest. But luckily, Bullseye's got his armor on. Still wounds him pretty bad. But it doesn't incapacitate him. Punisher tries to throw a grenade at him. Bullseye catches it and sticks a toothpick in it so it doesn't go off. And then throws it back at the Punisher with the needle out so it explodes. And I've never seen in a Punisher appearance, man, he is just getting his ass kicked by Bullseye. Bullseye is just totally laughing and joking. Punisher can't even get a beat on him at all, hasn't tagged him at all. And Bullseye is just wiping the floor with him. It's kind of interesting to see the Punisher be the guy who's just like up against, more than he can chew. He throws his knife right in the barrel of his gun so Punisher can't shoot him anymore. And then he's even goading him. He puts a bullseye in his forehead. He says, here, I'll make it easier for you. You can tell the Punisher's furious. And just as the Punisher's gonna chuck a missile at him, the DEA show up. And they're like, get on the ground now. And Bullseye totally lets himself be captured. And this is kind of funny as he flies away. Punisher's like, yeah, that's right, punk. Run away. It's like he just got his ass handed to him. He's like, yeah, Bullseye's not really running away from you. If the DA didn't show up, you'd probably be dead. So basically, now, once again, he's too valuable to go to jail. So now the NSA kind of recruit him. So he's been working for the NSA for a while. And apparently, they sent him to New York City, his first big job. He says, that's when I really started to have fun. And look at that. I even met a girl, he says. The iconic image from Daredevil 181, the cover. So next, number 4, the next issue, this is going to be a big treat if you were like a Miller Daredevil fan. This has got lots of like, almost like Easter eggy type little additions to that saga. Really nice cover by Deodato Jr. That's a pretty luscious looking Elektra. But these faces in the background, really nice too. So New York City in the 80s, or, you know, in Marvel Comics, they can never admit what decade it is, but it's the 80s probably. Because he talks about when New York City was all dirty before it got cleaned up. And Bullseye's getting his supervillain outfit from this punk rock tailor who works out of a basement flat. It's kind of just a weird touch. Like, were there tailors like this in New York City? I don't know. This one's called Make Your Mark. Bullseye says, I hit the town like a bomb. I pulled a couple of high-profile jobs, granted interviews to the press. Hell, I was even on television. And that's a reference to that great Daredevil issue where Bullseye escaped while he was being interviewed for a TV show. And we see a nice flashback to that issue when Daredevil showed up. So interesting watching, seeing Steve Dillon draw superheroes. He rarely has in his whole career. And I don't know, they just look a little more graceful or just human than your average superhero. You know, it's not dynamic. It just looks like a dude in a leotard, like a normal human. It's kind of a nice page, though. So, Baldry, he basically asks Bullseye a question, basically saying, so, you know, what is it like being an assassin? And it seems like this gets under Bullseye's skin, which is odd because, I mean, you are an assassin. A lot of your income is from killing people, you know, getting paid to kill people. But I don't know why he takes that as an insult. And it does seem like he's riled. And then he says, he starts talking about the nuclear warheads. He's kind of he's bragging. There's actually 2 things. I'm the only one who knows where they are. And the warden is watching. He says, Baldry did it. Bullseye's cracking. And then Hoskins fucks it up. And Hoskins starts yelling at him like a macho tough guy cop from a 70s TV show. And Bullseye just laughs. Outside the room, Baldry totally tears into him. He's like, oh, you dumbass. You fucking blew it. I was finally there. And then Hoskins is now just like so sure that like, he's just like, let me into the cell with him. Let's do things my way. Even though the warden agrees with Baldry that Hoskins screwed up, that they were getting somewhere, he relents. Meanwhile, Baldry is just having a private conversation with Bullseye. He's standing outside the door and Bullseye says, hey, is that you? And he starts telling him this kind of amazingly crazy story, almost like a conspiracy theory, or a conspiracy story. And of course, Baldry doesn't believe it at first. So basically, he says that when super villains, super criminals first arose, the government was terrified. And so basically he says that the NSA basically used Wilson Fisk as an asset, the kingpin. And Baldry doesn't believe it. And he says, how does a leg breaker from Hell's Kitchen end up running the largest criminal empire in the world in less than 3 years? And we can see by his expression that Baldry's like, oh, whoa, maybe Bullseye's telling the truth here. And basically, supposedly, Wilson Fisk was supposed to clean up the super villain element, but basically any superhero. So all that time, Bullseye was working for the Kingpin in the old Daredevil comics. That was really, he was working for the NSA still. It's kind of weird how like gritty this comic is, and seeing Bullseye in his old supervillain outfit looks almost silly, you know? So all these stories are now reinterpreted, recolored by this. There was that issue where Bullseye caught up with the Black Widow and basically held her hostage so Daredevil would come. But now it's, oh no, he was working for the NSA, kind of tracking down super people. But when he talks about Elektra, he says, no, she wasn't an agent. There was something about her I couldn't help myself. I was crazy about her, but she died. So this is just another example of this. I love this unreliable narrator technique where what he's saying, it contradicts what actually we can see happened with the art. Man, look at him just smiling like he's just got kissed by a girl that he loves as he runs Elektra's blades through her chest. Complete nutters. And then he says the only agent he couldn't neutralize was Daredevil. He was always one step ahead of him. Oh, this is a reference to that great issue where Bullseye goes nuts and he sees everyone in New York City as Daredevil. It's almost like he has Daredevil phobia. And this is just, I love this here. Now we're really figuring out like how diabolical Bullseye is. So after telling him this whole conspiracy theory, getting him to believe it, then he just says, oh, you know that thing I just told you about the Kingpin? I totally made it up. It's a lie. And he says, I was bored, so I just wanted to make up a story. I miss that Hoskins guy. He's entertaining. And right then Hoskins comes back in, and Bullseye says, game on. And the warden says, prepare to open the cell. And Hoskins, you know, with gritted teeth, fucking hard case says, no more games. And look at Bullseye. He's just like, oh, you're fucked. This is another, if you were reading this monthly, I would be like counting the days. Because the way they built up how formidable Bullseye is, it's just like, oh God, please do not open that cell door. Do not do this. You are not going to come out of this unscathed. So, of course, they call Horace in case there's trouble. And this one's called Into the Fire, this chapter. So Hoskins just starts immediately shoving Bullseye around. Knocks him on his ass. The first time it seems like Bullseye loses his cool. He says, do not touch me again. And Hoskins taps him on the knee, trying to get a rise out of him. Meanwhile, the warden gets news from the medical team. They say, hey, the prelims just came in. That wasn't a tumor in Bullseye's brain. It was just some scar tissue. And the warden says, but what about his seizure? And the doctor says, well, he shouldn't have had one. There's no reason why. And so now you realize that this whole thing is so Machiavellian or just diabolical. Bullseye's been just planning this for so long. And so Bullseye just starts egging him on and trying to piss him off. And Bullseye apparently, obviously doesn't really, he's not even feeling his punches. But he says, okay, you got me. I buried it in the some campground 2 miles from here. You can't miss it. I painted a big X on the ground. And then he says, nah, not really. I'm just messing with you. And this just sets Hoskins off. And Hoskins really starts punching him. And this is exactly what Bullseye wanted. Because he turns up his face. And Hoskins knocked a tooth out, which he is clenching in his teeth. If this was any other human being in the world, you'd be like, so? But this is Bullseye. And I gotta say, guys, I have to totally suspend my disbelief for this sequence because I like this comic and I want to continue liking it. But, once again, I don't care how good your aim is. There's no way you could spit a tooth through a human skull. It's not like Bullseye has super tongue muscles or anything like that. It's just impossible. It actually goes through his skull and kills Hoskins. Very silly. But still pretty dramatic. It's still kind of a cool idea if it was possible. So all of a sudden we go into, red alert mode. Oh, strangely enough, all of a sudden, Steve Dillon is drawing Brian Bolland faces. These are amazingly well-drawn faces. I've never seen Steve Dillon draw like this. They still look like all the faces he's drawn over the years, but very different. Look at Bullseye. God, it looks creepy as hell. So, of course, what's-his-face shows up, Horace, and he shoots his one bullet at Bullseye, who has such good aim that his indestructible handcuffs, he can use it to make the bullet ricochet right back into Horace's eye socket, cyber eye, and kill him. He's just that good. So the warden and his crew, they're just treating this like it's a radiation leak at 3 Mile Island. They're just like, evacuate, we gotta get the hell out of here. That's how scary Bullseye is. And as soon as they get out of the compound, they're on the surface, these 2 guys just shoot him dead. So apparently they know Bullseye. I think they're his associates or they're doing a deal with him. Meanwhile, Baldry's left all alone with Bullseye and he is just shitting his pants. Bullseye twists the knife by just saying, you really think my brother, to protect us, burned our home? And, his name's not even Nate, my brother. In fact, he's still alive, and he has 3 kids and lives in Idaho. And you want to know something else? I set the fire. His dad managed to get out, though, with his government training. And we find out, not just any government training, NSA training. So this whole image of his father on fire saying, is that all you got? It's not said here, but that's basically probably what he said it. He said that to young Bullseye. Baldry says, are you going to kill me? And Bullseye actually says, nah, I'll let you run for it. But then just to humiliate him, he says, do me a favor, though. When you're running, hold up your arms and, flail them around, okay? And Baldry does it looking like an idiot. And Bullseye, the only reason he let him go is because he knows that there's not enough time. And Baldry gets caught in that foam stuff and is instantly suffocated. Bullseye uses Horace. He drags him over to the security panel to let himself into this room. One of the other prisoners there. It's an old man in some kind of high-tech medical gurney. And Bullseye says, "Hi, Dad." And so he takes his dad out into the hallway. The whole time his dad is just glaring at him. And he puts himself back in this other room that's fireproof. And Bullseye says to his dad, "Is that all you're gonna do? Stare at me? Is that the best you got?" Uses his dad's line against him. So basically the whole thing about blowing up that East Coast installation, it appears that he did that just so when his elaborate scheme, when he let himself get arrested, he didn't want to be sent to that other one because his father wasn't there. So he blew it up so there was no chance he could be sent there. And then we cut away. We don't see the father get incinerated. But we see Bullseye come out of the compound. And the two guys are waiting for him. And so he makes this call. He tells them, "Oh yeah, the plutonium you guys are buying from me, it's on a playground 2 miles, a campground 2 miles from here. I painted a big white X." So he was totally telling the truth earlier. Like he was totally fucking with their heads the whole time. It's almost like the guy in Usual Suspects. I can't remember the name of on the coffee mug, whatever his name was, where you just like, holy shit, this guy, what a brain that he planned this whole thing out. And on the other end of the line, we see this guy, Pay the Man. He says, "I feel like I should know who this is, but maybe I'm not a good reader, or maybe they didn't tell us, but I'm sure there's some reference to him earlier." And so Bullseye gets $3 million transferred to his bank account. The two associates are like, "We thought you were boosting the plutonium out of that place." He says, "Well, you thought wrong." And they're like, "But then why did you blow this whole place up?" And Bullseye says, "Because I can." And then Bullseye rides off into the sunset and gives the reader a very creepy last close-up. So there you go, guys. Bullseye, greatest hits, number 1 through 5. Quite a read, pretty fun comic. It totally had me going. You know, I haven't read many superhero comics in the past, the current ones in the past, I don't know, since 2000s. And this was just, if there's more superhero comics like this out there, I think I'm going to be buying more superhero comics. But I have a feeling this was a product of that great period, both at Marvel and DC, in like the early 2000s to the mid to late 2000s. I have a feeling that's gone. Just from hearing my comic podcasts, nerdy podcasts, the way they talk about what's going on in comics now, I'm just like, nothing sounds as interesting to me in the mainstream. So I hope you guys enjoyed looking at it, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.